Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess. I believe this is episode 26. Let me do some math here. Yeah, 26. Great way to start an episode, just counting then the numbers. But I'm excited today because I did get a little inspiration. Posted last week's episode super late. You know, this has been a tug of war thing with me. If I have things going on in my life, I will postpone posting. If I'm maybe not inspired, I will postpone posting. And I just figured I think the best way to combat this, and a way I'm going to try to combat this, is trying to induce inspiration and just consume a lot of content when I'm not, completely engaged with school or whatever else is going on, working. I've just been kind of getting into a diversity of content. I'm trying to read. I've really start today off by talking about my little social media hiatus. It's something that I feel like, oh shit, street racers. Those Dallas street racers. But not sure if you could hear that on the recording. It was very loud in the recording studio, aka my kitchen. But to get back on track, I did take a little social media hiatus. There's probably like a dozen people out there. Probably 100% of people that listen to this show were in that group of 12 that maybe missed me posting on social media. And I can tell you it was a very productive time. I did crush my final exams, get excellent grades last trimester. I did win the Texas-Oklahoma State Championship in weightlifting. So being off social media just cleared up all that memory and space in my brain, as if, talking as if it were a computer. I just had a lot of extra space to succeed in life. I think sometimes it's easy to, get caught up in social media or use social media. I mean, it's kind of the lowest, laziest form of being social. You get on someone's post, just drop a comment, drop a DM. It's a great way to stay in touch, especially my friends that live out of town. They don't live. I mean, now moving to Dallas, I have less friends, that I see in person, but I still have all, friends on social media. So it's great to send memes, stay in touch. But I really do find that I do not like social media interactions as much as in person. I love going places and seeing people. So thankfully at school and over at the gym, different places I've gone, I've just met a lot of great people. So now I got about a dozen folks in person I like to see regularly, talk shit to, all that good stuff. So in other words, social media break served two purposes: focus on other things, being, school and work, and then also focusing on in-person social interactions. If I'm craving a social interaction and I'm not getting it from social media, I'm going to go out and say hello to someone that, maybe I wouldn't have otherwise. I think that's where a lot of people find themselves, is just preoccupied with other things and, honestly, like getting their little social cravings satiated by the internet. So when it comes to being in person, being friendly, being funny, having the energy to, have an interaction, I think people just don't anymore. So that sucks. That's something that I wanted to share about what I've been doing, and also, talk about the benefits, but also now, I will say yesterday I posted again. I came back to it, posted on the story, posted basically a dump of, as my friend Tim has called me in the past, the Riddler. I just post a bunch of things that kind of happened over the last 11 days. Either things that I experienced directly or things that I saw. I think it was just expression of, what I've been thinking about. So it's interesting coming back to Instagram. Also, a while back, you might remember, Mark Zuckerberg came out, wrote a letter to one of the, I believe, can't keep track of him anymore, if he's a House of Representative member or a senator. I believe it was Jim Jordan, and Zuck came out and basically said, like, hey, we manipulated this, kind of taking some ownership of what Facebook, Instagram, Meta does. And I thought that was pretty cool. There's a lot of people recently that are kind of like taking ownership of things. Like even Donald Trump, when he was, the attempted assassination, seemed to me like it kind of just put some things in perspective for him, and he would talk about things a different way. And now all of a sudden he's like working with RFK Jr., working with Tulsi Gabbard, kind of forming a coalition against the established current regime in Washington. I think that's just super interesting when people pivot, and I think a lot about the motivations behind things like that. Why would Zuck kind of come out and apologize? And either, to me, there's two motivations. So one could be he has something to gain in business from doing that, or he's having a genuine, like, personal kind of revelation. He's having maybe some physical symptoms, some mental symptoms, different things based on his decisions, and he's kind of trying to walk it back and start to make it right, which I think is interesting. So I have no idea which one is true, but I liked it. And then, interestingly enough, I kind of hopped back on there, and I was looking around, and a new show I've been watching, again, to try and consume more content, and especially content. It's funny. It's a crossover between kind of the sports community and also the African American community and culture at large. That, me being a white man, I'm not like super connected to. I've been watching the Nightcap, which is Chad Ochocinco and the big man Shannon Sharp. He kind of bust onto the scene. I use the word bust on purpose. Club Shay Shay, when Cat Williams came on and kind of gave an unhinged interview. It's kind of funny. So that's when I kind of started paying attention to that. But yeah, I really got into Nightcap, just listening to those guys talk about things after hours. It's something easy to put on while I'm studying or whatever. It's just kind of in the background, a little talk radio. And also just, I think it's been good to learn about overall like African American culture. And like sports is a thing that I understand, so it's a way for me to kind of connect those two worlds and see a different perspective, see something in a different way maybe that I haven't seen before. But that's all to say that I got on Instagram and found out he accidentally turned on Instagram Live and then had sex, and so it was like an audio only sex tape, and it was live. That's fucking legendary. That's like so funny to me. So I'm like, all right, how? Like, I got on Instagram and I started looking around. I'm like, how could I possibly accidentally turn Instagram Live on? Like, that's a nightmare, especially for someone like him who's just like, he's got 3 different shows. One on ESPN, and things are going well for him. It's growing, and then something like this happens. It's just funny. Life's funny in that way. So I feel like, now I do have a little bit more social connection in person, which I plan to, keep kind of focusing on. But, yeah, I took care of business with the exams. I took care of business with the weightlifting meet I wanted to do well at. And so now I'm just kind of back into, kind of a normal phase of life, getting back into school. We're just doing the low level stuff right now. So when it comes to finals again, in 2 months, I may take another mini break, but overall, I'm happy about where I'm at and kind of ready to dip back into it. So that is a almost literally on the dot 10-minute intro to the topic I want to talk about today, which is getting away with things, not necessarily murder. Murder is like a very, that's like the phrase, but murder is a very extreme example, not something you should try to get away with. But all that to say that in life, I find so many examples where people are just trying to get away with shit, like get the most out of something for the least amount of effort. And I think if there's anything that's killing our society, it's that. And I'm not saying that, there is some people in our society that, they give a lot, don't get much in return, and they're kind of underappreciated. But that's a really vast minority, I think. I think a lot of us, maybe not in all areas of our life, but in some, we're trying to squeeze every last bit of value out of something. And we always kind of feel like we're getting the short end of the stick, but we're really just focusing on the instances where we might lose out on a situation. You kind of take an L. Everyone takes L's. But it's easy to focus on the times where you take an L. It's really hard to focus on being grateful for all the times where you do come out with a W. And I think if I really look at all the situations in my life, I'm coming out with way more W's on a daily basis. But I always, if I'm in a bad mood, it's because I'm focusing on that one L I took. It's always like one tiny one a day that just gets under your skin. You're like, oh. But I kind of came up with just a couple examples. I started just riffing on it, and I found that it was permeating every situation I was running into, which again, that's the inspiration. Just if you get outside, get into situations, talk to different people, you start to realize that this stuff is punching you right in the face. So something I was focusing on just happened to really kind of hit home with me. Hopefully it does with you too. So back to Facebook. Speaking of getting away with things, they get away with a lot. So the model of Facebook is people post things about their life. At the basest level, I find that I post I like to think I'm posting because I want to inspire people. And I think that is a good portion of my motivation. I like to post weightlifting, show how hard I'm working, show how hard you have to work to be good at it. And so other people out there doing it will say, hey, he's working hard. I need to go work hard. I want to be good at weightlifting too. And it's kind of like a community thing. That's cool. But a lot of us too are looking for validation, looking for connection, things like that. And I'm lying if I say I post a big lift and I don't get a little hit of, oh, they like it. They like me. They think I'm good at weightlifting, and I think that's pretty common. So what Facebook does is they use that incentive that you have for connection, for, validation, and that's free content. So someone else looking at my content is bringing people to the Instagram platform. And so all the people you follow, they're all working for free, essentially. Maybe not all. Some of them are getting paid off Instagram, but most are not. I can tell you I'm not. And even in between that, they will get businesses to pay to put ads in front of your face every so often. So there's another money stream. So bringing to the app and then monetizing that attention. And it can easily be weaponized against you. I mean, everyone talks about this algorithm. If I just show you things you like all day, you're going to get a pretty warped sense of reality. And I can tell you, being off Instagram for over 2 months, I kind of just got back to myself and like who I actually am at my core. I wasn't being influenced by, an algorithm that was kind of just negative feedback looping my greatest hits, negative, positive, whatever, feedback loop. Don't place a value on it. But I thought that was really interesting. Coming back to it, I think my plan is less kind of mindless scrolling and more so like could be like a close friends list or like paring down who I'm following, kind of unfollowing some accounts, but making sure that what they're showing me is something that I consciously chose rather than something I followed on a whim while I was flipping through and got sponsored ads and whatever. So I think really a big key to, obviously mentioned that's kind of like a negative outlook on what Facebook can do. A positive outlook can be, like I said before, it can help you keep in touch with friends that don't live in your city. You can see their progress, what they're up to, different things. You can stay in touch, sending memes. So it's not like I'm going to get rid of everything, but I'm going to get rid of the mindless shit that I find myself doing, especially in the past. So major key there. And just think about like what Facebook is getting away with. I mean, it's not like, okay, I'm not saying that my content is worth a lot of money, but basically I'm posting for free work, bringing attention to their platform in my own small little piece of the pie. So we're all kind of doing it. We're all sharing this burden. And even at the end of the day, if you want to take it a level deeper to Facebook, sharing information with other platforms and with the government, and you can look at all the things they're doing. It's infinitely complicated. But in a way, me not being on there, not posting, was kind of like a mini protest that no one cared about either, because I'm such a small part of the pie that my protest, wasn't noticed necessarily. But I will say, like, being off of it, like morally, I did feel like, okay, hey, I don't like how my data, how my free labor is being used. So like, if you don't like that, I mean, your choice is stop using it. Like, if you're unhappy with something, stop doing it. And there's so many cases in life where we're unhappy with something, but we are completely complicit with what's happening. Like, we are continuing to give into it for one reason or another, usually some type of chemical reason, neurotransmitters, dopamine, all the above. And it's low stakes, so we feel like, maybe in the long run it's not that big of a deal, but I think it adds up over time. The death by 1,000 cuts. It is a big deal. And like I said, having the perspective of being off the platform for over 2 months, it just feels right. That feels like a correct statement. So that's Facebook. Another thing that kind of came up this morning. Well, two things that came up this morning. So one, Thursdays for me are a bit of online school. So I have lectures mostly on Tuesdays in person. It's a pretty long day, like 9-10 hours of, content. And then Thursday, they kind of give us a break. So to me, my first trimester I did online. I went back to Columbus, Ohio, to kind of stay with family, spend some time with my young niece and nephew and my immediate family. Did a lot of yoga, a lot of relaxing, different things, and it was great. But the online school part, I am not for online school. Like, my brain chemistry, reward systems, just my ability to learn, I think I learned is significantly decreased. And now I can tell you, having been in person for a whole trimester after doing 2 online, in person my grades were vastly different, almost 20 percentage points higher on average. No, I say 20, but yeah, we'll call it 20. And I think for me, part of that is that in-person social component, being able to study with classmates in person, hop in a room, talk to somebody about it, be able to see the professors in person, put a face with a name, ask them a question during a lab. The in-person labs obviously are super important. Putting your hands on actual equipment, having chiropractic tables, Like, I can keep naming things. But basically, like, that's so beneficial to me. And not to say that I feel like I'm an example of every person, but I feel like at our core, we're all pretty similar, especially when it comes to like chemical things, processes that happen in your brain, in your glands, in your body. And I can just tell you, like, if it's that way for me, I would say at least 50% of people are going to feel the same way. That in person is better. And if you like online classes, it might be because you like not being held accountable for being at a specific place at a specific time, having to kind of pay attention, and it's like all the reasons why you're going to school. So like for me, it's an accountability that I like. Not that I can't hold myself accountable, but I think being there in person and being held accountable is something that is helpful to me. Maybe I don't need it. Maybe I could figure out a way to manufacture it with online school, but I feel like that learning curve was going to take more away from me than it was going to give. So really glad to be in person. But we do have this one class. I won't like name it. Nobody really knows or cares. But I did also have it last trimester and the trimester before. So this is the third time I'll have this professor. And I can tell you, like, I know he does live in the Dallas area because he has an office on campus. He's around. You see him from time to time. But he's not abundantly available. And all of his lectures are online. There's no in-person lab component to his class. And I feel like, you know, he also is the author of the textbook. He's highly involved in all these other things you see him doing, including like writing questions for boards. And, you know, you come to find out, you see his name on a lot of things. So this guy's real busy. Seems like teaching this class isn't his highest priority. And between him and the university, there's obviously some agreement where this is what they've said, like, hey, we're going to pay you for this. And yeah, you don't have to teach his classes in person. You don't have to have an in-person lab component. We're cool with that. Cool. And that's like a little handshake agreement. I personally find that to be substandard for like what I'm paying for. I'm taking loans out for. And again, I don't learn well online. So I'm working through it personally. It's not a circumstance that I can change, you know, so I have to just work with what we got. So that's cool. I'm with it. But I can tell you that that's not the best effort that professor can give. And I think in any relationship, so professor, student, whatever, both sides should be giving maximum effort if they really care about the outcome of this thing, which is like student learning, passing boards, passing the class, whatever. And because the university lets him get away with not, you know, that's the standard they're holding, is it's cool to just all be online and don't have to do any in-person stuff. You know, we're pretty far away, removed from COVID. There's no pandemic. You know, it's kind of like there's not really much excuse. There's no really reason why. It's just this is what they've negotiated. It kind of puts more on the student, especially if the student isn't good online. So now I kind of have more of a burden there. But in other classes, I'll say professors are very giving and forthcoming and available. And that kind of takes some off my plate to where it's more of an even exchange. Like I can give them all of my attention and learning ability, and they can give me all the content, all their attention, and you know, it's more of an even exchange. So that's nice. But I just think like for the long-term quality of life and our programs, these things that we're doing, you have to hold yourself accountable. So if I'm this professor, I'm going to say, hey, there's no pandemics going on. There's no reason other than my preference as to why these classes are online. You know, I'm a busy guy, but I'm choosing to be busy. I'm choosing to take on all these projects. You know, if that's the case, if you're really trying to be the best professor you can be, I think you'd maybe switch this class and do an in-person setting. And it could be also that they don't have enough classroom space. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of moving parts. I get it. But still, like, what's the standard we're holding ourselves to? So that was an example. And then another example to make it even simpler. So almost every morning, except for when I have early class, I'll walk, sometime around 9. I'll kind of leave the apartment. I'll walk to, there's a couple of different places to get coffee. There's a Starbucks, there's a 7-Eleven. Side note, if you're not on this, you can think about it. It's basically like $1.75. You can go into a 7-Eleven. They have an automatic espresso machine, grinds the beans right there for you. And you can put water in it, make a little iced Americano. It's 40% of the cost of like a Starbucks or a Dutch Bros or whatever else you're drinking. And to be honest, it's pretty good. And I'm kind of making it myself. So honestly, what I'm doing is, that 60% that's paying for, the Starbucks location and all the other stuff that happens in Starbucks and the baristas, I think it's just me taking that back, making the espresso myself. I push a couple buttons, no worries, and add a little water, pay $1.79 or whatever it is, and walk out. And so just a little student hack, or if you just want to cut your coffee budget in half, but still have that sweet brown nectar, that's a good thing to do. But I will say, so outside this 7-Eleven, there's typically a few homeless people, and there's a decent amount of homeless in Dallas. And I mean, even in Austin, when I was living in Austin, there's a lot more than even in Dallas. But this one woman flagged me down and was asking me for cash, and it just made me think on this same line of what are we allowing ourselves and others to get away with? And the reason that she was flagging me down is because other people have given her money when she flags them down. So she's just following a pattern to try and make a living, basically get money to survive. And I don't have cash. I never carry cash. And I said hey, I'm sorry, don't have any cash on me. And she was polite and just went about her way. But she also flashed a big wad of cash that she had, of dollar bills that she's obviously gotten from other people. And I was just thinking to myself, I've been there. I've been in that scenario where I feel man, I wish someone would just help me out. And in all honesty, the root of that feeling, for me at least, is I'm not holding myself accountable in some area. There's always some way to go about what I'm doing, maybe in a little bit better fashion. Like I was saying with a professor, you're doing your online classes, but if you want to be the best professor you could be, provide the most value, you maybe change that class to in person. If you're homeless and you're asking folks for money, sounds cliche, but you could get a job doing something that you at least enjoy a little bit, and maybe it doesn't pay much, but you do that for 6 months and then maybe change to another job where you get paid a little bit better. I know opportunities are slim in some cases, and people don't have the resumes to really climb the ladder that quickly, but I think you got to be optimistic and you got to do what's best for yourself, and leaving it in the hands of others is just something that I personally try not to do, because more often than not, other people, at least in my experience, have been self-interested or interested in some other outcome. Maybe we're not aligned. I'm trying to be the best employee I can be, and maybe at times I am trying to get away with things. That's also been true. And that combination of being the best you can be and also kind of doing the least for the most amount of pay, I think we all have some combination of that. I like to think that I definitely, when I go into a job, I think it's more so the former. I'm trying to be the best I can be, but then over time, I think a lot in our society these days, this is true, but you get into a job, get with a boss that you're not aligned with, and then you just try to figure out, all right, what's the least I can do, and just get paid and get out of here and go to the gym and go, fuck off with my friends. And that's just not a good situation to be in. It's something where when I've been in those situations, either I've removed myself or I've been fired. So I definitely push it to the edge, to the point where I got to move on and grow and do something else. So, but yeah, that's an interesting thing that came up with me with the homeless. I mean, she was asking me for money because people let her get away with that to survive. And people are going to do the least, I think the least amount of effort for the most reward, because that's how you survive. It's energy exchange. But that doesn't mean that you have to give in to that. It just means that that's kind of our base nature. So you can rise above that. And, obviously try to get the most, but then also put in, more effort, and like put in your best effort. Like, I want to get the most for my best effort. And then that's where maybe you get paid more than you've ever been paid, and you also get better, like it's funny, you kind of grow. So you're now, instead of doing the least, you're doing your best, and your best becomes better. And then you get rewarded in that way, and you actually make more money. And that's not always how it goes. That's not something you should expect, but it's how you should operate, because at the end of the day, in my experience, it does work out sometimes. You need a little luck with that. We're talking before, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So the opportunity doesn't always come up, but if it does, better be prepared, better be putting forth your best effort. And that doesn't necessarily mean 110%. Some people give 110% and they burn out, and then you're not available. The best ability is availability. All right, so more examples. Let's see, I've done school, Facebook, homeless. Couple more and we'll get out of here. One that always comes up to me, I always see, is like online coaches. So I'm someone coaching again at D-Town CrossFit, and I'm a coach that I genuinely want to see people get better. I don't want to just trade money for time. I want to be able to give someone that one thing that kind of unlocks something for them. And it doesn't always happen. I'm always looking for those opportunities. But again, the person kind of has to be willing. They have to have that drive in themselves to get better, to maybe humble themselves and do something that maybe makes them seem inexperienced or kind of less than, a drill that you might have to do to get better, to then do the thing you want to do. You have to be able to step back. I've been able in my career to step back and really learn something from the beginning. As a beginner, look kind of silly, but then I usually get better at it very fast, and that phase doesn't last very long. So if someone's there, they're willing to do it, that's great. And I love to see people get better. A lot of times when people work with me, though, we never get there for one reason or another. I'm not able, I don't see an opportunity, and again, they're not prepared. Maybe they're not. You got to come into the gym with the right attitude, and then the coach has to be ready to take that opportunity to deliver that message. So online coaches I see a lot, they'll market some type of benefit, and they'll you take someone who's like a Olympic gymnastic, gold medalist, example, this isn't happening, but Simone Biles, for example, puts out a gymnastics program. People are going to eat it up because she is who she is. She has gold medals out the ass. But that doesn't mean that what she's selling is good and that it's going to work. And maybe it is good, but you have to execute it properly, and a person is never going to be able to execute it on their own. And people will still just make thousands of dollars online for bullshit. And I can tell you that a big struggle for me has been wanting to make money as a coach, but also wanting to do it in person and in the manner I was talking about, where someone actually gets something out of it. You can see a measurable thing, like, hey, I didn't have a muscle up and now I have a muscle up. Like, that's what I'm looking for. But the jump from no muscle up to one muscle up is multifaceted, can be complicated sometimes, and it just requires like a lot of humility from both a coach and an athlete to really just come together and work on the 3 or 4 things that they need to do. And again, even like the social media, it's like, if I pay $100 for this program, I get that immediate dopamine hit, like, oh, look at me, I'm taking a step to get better. Versus if I pay someone $100 for a personal training session, I might need 10 more sessions, and that's going to cost me 10 times as much as this program, and I don't get the instant satisfaction, so I'm going to quit. And that's just, again, it's like how we've been conditioned to operate in our lives now. I mean, Amazon, it's like, I need food, cool, DoorDash, food's at your door, and it's like, wow, look at me, I'm so powerful. I can make all this stuff happen for me. It happens on a cycle, all the time. It's crazy how we're conditioned presently. But yeah, again, like as an online coach, it's like, sure, I could make programs that I can sell that are bullshit, and then I can make a bunch of hype around it. And what you never hear, though, is when someone buys that program and doesn't get better, they don't post about, hey, I bought this program from so-and-so and I never got better. Thousands of them. And you don't have to have that testimony to look at their Instagram and see that they're still squatting the same weights that they were. People now post the evidence. So like, and sure, some people get better. I think some athletes, though, underestimate their own talent and ability. Like if you put a human being under a certain type of positive stress and then you feed them food and you put them to bed, they're going to get stronger. And maybe they weren't that strong before, and so it's going to be easy to get strong fast. And that a little bit too, people get excited and they post about it, and then they don't really understand what's happening to them. And then no one talks to them 2 years later. Like, hey, how did that go? Well, I injured myself and then I ended up weaker than when I started. Well, why'd you injure yourself? Because there's no coach paying attention to you, because you paid for something one time and then you injured yourself and you never came back. And I guess this also, again, to play devil's advocate, could be a failure of coaches like me to demonstrate value. But I think demonstrating the value is difficult. And again, like I like difficult problems, so it's something I've been working on, trying to really figure out how to do that in an age where like value is kind of really consistently demonstrated over time and also like followed up on. Like I want to talk to someone I coached 5 years ago. At this point, I have that now. I have that ability. I could go back and get a testimonial from someone I worked with ages ago, and they could tell me where they're at now and how I helped them and helped them build upon, and then they built upon it since. Maybe they stopped working with me, but they're still getting better and they appreciate what we did. That kind of thing, could be helpful. Who knows? But that's a problem for me to solve, not one for you. Right now, a big one. I listened to a podcast a couple weeks ago with Tucker Carlson and Casey and Callie Means. They talked a lot about, I believe it's Casey. Dr. Casey was a Stanford physician, so like going to be a surgeon, I think. But she was training at Stanford, so she's kind of on top of the world. She put a decade into becoming a doctor, and she had this crisis of conscience, like I was talking about before with Zuck. Someone who gets to the quote unquote top of the mountain and then realizes, oh my gosh, what I'm doing is like morally fucked up or whatever. So she just realized that she was taught how to diagnose and then treat symptoms. And I'll say it's interesting being in chiropractic school. I can see a lot of that too. Like I'm kind of being shown how to like zoom in on like a knee, for example. And they might talk like, okay, yeah, you know, the knee's innervated by this, you know, branch of the spine, whatever. But like, if you're really thinking about a patient holistically, there's so many things that go into it. It gets really complicated, and that's pretty hard to teach. So they kind of have to simplify it. But the problem with med school that she was talking about, Dr. Casey, is that even when you zoom in, they never zoom out. And I think in chiropractic, we zoom out enough that we kind of understand the system. But she was basically being shown how to diagnose, prescribe something, or do surgery or whatever. And it was kind of like a money machine. And at the end of the day, money, I say money is the root of all evil. I think it's not. I think it's people, the way we use money, the way we try to get it, the way that it's like an endless pursuit of it. Like, I know what I need to live each year, and like beyond that, I mean, it just, you know, I'm happy walking to 7-Eleven and getting a coffee for 40% of what I pay at Starbucks, and that's cool, and that's economics. You know, they have a similar product that's priced lower, so I'm gonna go do it. I don't need my Starbucks. I used to really love it. But yeah, you grow and you realize like what makes you happy. And I was working really hard, making more money than I ever had. And I just realized like, this isn't making me happy at all. And, we all get caught up in this, but luckily, you know, Dr. Casey realized like, hey, all this stuff I'm doing, it's just hurting people. Again, in the moment, it might clear up their symptoms, but it's not dealing with the root cause of different things. So shout out to Dr. Casey, her brother Callie, for kind of taking a stand and honestly personally sacrificing. You know, after spending all that time, you could just hop into the system and print money for yourself. And you know, now I think they're trying to earn a living a different way, which is great. But yeah, as doctors, you know, what standard are you holding yourself to? Are you just going to do what you were trained to do? And when you're with a patient, someone that's in pain, dealing with issues, or are you going to do the right thing and like maybe help them get to the root cause? And maybe they don't have to come back and see you, or maybe you don't get money from a referral, or maybe you don't get money from a prescription, but you help someone live healthier for the next 10 years of their life. You know, that's something I'm thinking about is, you know, I don't want people to just buy packages and come get adjusted, you know, every 3 days from me. I want to try and solve their issues in, you know, 2 to 3 appointments or less, and then hope they come back if anything else comes up. I think that's the right way to kind of approach chiropractic, and I'm sure maybe my opinion will change. Who knows? Last but not least, we're about 43 minutes in, so I'm going to try to squeeze this in, but on my Instagram dump, I did put a picture of Tyreek Hill celebrating a touchdown with Jalen Waddle kind of holding his hands behind his back like he's being arrested. The reason he did that is because before the game, he was pulling up to the stadium in a sports car, maybe speeding, and he got pulled over by the Miami-Dade police. And what transpired is not super surprising. Again, I talked about African-American culture, listening to, you know, Shannon Sharp and Chad Johnson, and kind of connecting with that point of view. And man, traffic stops are just an interaction with the police. You know, you just really never know what you're going to get. And men in general are kind of powder kegs at the moment. Even myself, I mean, I get frustrated. And I think being frustrated is fair. I think if you're mad, you also need to put yourself in timeout. When I talk about like personal responsibility and accountability, like the theme of today is, I think it's really on you to like really police yourself first and foremost. And if, you know, you're in a bad spot, make that known to others and really try to like isolate yourself and deal with it before you start having interactions. And ultimately what happened was I did listen to some audio too, like a body cam, but basically Tyreek didn't roll his window down right away. The officer knocked on the window. Of course, it's a sports car. I don't know what kind it was, but very expensive vehicle. Maybe Tyreek's late to the game because they were about to play a Sunday football game, and they got into an exchange about like, hey, don't knock on my window. Hey, well, you didn't roll down your window. And the officer and him just were getting heated over something so stupid. But behind Tyreek is this like, being a black man in America, police just stopped me. I can imagine that my cortisol would shoot through the roof. We talk about chemical issues with neurotransmitters, but stress hormones are global. They affect your whole body and pretty much immediately. Very, very powerful, and like inducing like a fear response so that you can protect yourself. And back in the day, it was like getting chased by a jungle cat or whatever it may be. Now, the jungle cat are these police officers. And maybe this police officer didn't deserve that kind of sass, and maybe, whatever. Police officers should also be trained. Like, I go out into the world not really ever getting in a traffic stop. I'm not, like, expecting to get pulled over, but, like, it could happen. But police officers, that's their job. They're out there pulling people over who are doing things they shouldn't be. So being trained to go in that situation and realize, like, hey, this is a really expensive sports car. I did just knock on the window. Would be pretty easy to be like, hey, man, well, you got to roll it down sooner. No worries. I'm not going to knock on this window again. Now let's get to the issue at hand. Do you know how fast you were going? And I say this right now from the comfort of my kitchen. It's very easy. But that's like obviously ideally what should happen. And I think it's possible. It's not unreasonable to think that that could have been how it went. And then Tyreek could have pulled back and been like, yeah, man, I don't know how fast I was going. I got to get to this game. I'm Tyreek Hill. Like, if we need to handle some business, we can handle it. But I would appreciate it if we could get, through it so I get on my way. The police officer gives him a ticket. That's fair. If he's speeding, whatever. And I'm just like, of course, Tyreek Hill ends up face down on the pavement. And there was just nothing in that situation. And having like watched the body cam footage and listened to the audio, like there's nothing that, warranted what happened. It was just two guys flaring up their egos. And this is how cortisol and other stress hormones like affect us. Being triggered, so to speak. But again, in life, like, you got to be able to police yourself. You got to be able to grow as a human being and like know when you're triggered. It's like example yesterday, I was like unprepared for something relating to a lab at school. And I felt myself kind of being triggered. I'm like, hey, this is really fucking silly. Like, can we just not, like, hey, can I just like get this thing and like I'll be on my way? And just the way that the rules are written and how the people in the scenario were acting, I mean, it was just, quite frankly, it was bullshit. And I felt my cortisol spike, and again, like bringing back to this thing of consciousness, I just knew at that point I was like completely compromised. Like I wasn't going to like, there really was no like positive outcome. It was either going to be a neutral or a negative outcome. So immediately I defaulted to kind of my new default of neutral. I'm like, hey, how can I just like get out of here with a 0? Not a 0 on any kind of assignment, but just like no change in life status. We don't want things to spiral out of control. I don't want to end up, face down on the pavement, so to speak. And, I just kind of like politely said like, hey, I gotta get to my next thing. like, are you good? Do you want to, if you want to talk about this, I mean, we can email, set up a meeting, or I'll see you next week in lab. But if you don't need to, like, I'm just going to go. We can just forget that this happened. And that's what happened. They were like, cool. And like, that's it. For me, obviously I'm talking about it now because it's a great example, but I left the lab and I was proud of myself for recognizing that I was, triggered. And then obviously afterwards I went to the gym. I did my like physical practices, did a workout. I felt great afterwards. And I kind of cleared that cortisol out of my system. Again, like there's a lot that can be solved with blood circulation. So hopping in a sauna, doing a cardiovascular workout, clearing those hormones, those neurotransmitters, can be really great. So I kind of vibe with both the police officer and Tyreek Hill. I can understand how cortisol, the vibes are pretty low in that scenario and things happen. But there's really no excuse for it. I mean, on both sides, if we both come to the situation buttoned up, wake up in the morning, I practice a lot of yoga, I meditate. When I walk out of my door, I'm prepared. Like if I get triggered by something that happens, if I go get pulled over right now, my cortisol is going to spike. I'm going to be pissed. I want to get a ticket. Nobody does. But I can talk to that officer in a way that gets me out of there, with minimal damage. You might get a ticket, but there's not going to be anything out of the ordinary that happens. Sometimes you just got to keep things ordinary. It's easy to strive for kind of extraordinary positive circumstances like getting a bonus, getting paid on a project that you've been working on, getting good grades. But striving for that and kind of coming off center, being unbalanced, you can also go the other way and have extraordinary, negative outcomes. So staying balanced and just working through things, being persistent, and ultimately having that attitude kind of oriented towards the long term. I'm going to hold myself accountable. And like in this moment, no one's here. No one's going to see me skip this workout. No one's going to see me not watch that lecture video. No one's going to see me, eat a pupusa. I don't know. Like whatever. Do something that I shouldn't be doing. Because we all know kind of deep down, we have this like guilt and shame when we do something we know that's not aligned with us and who we are. So you got to be able to overcome your internal chemistry, shift long term, do things without recognition. I think that's one thing why I got off Instagram too, is I wasn't going to be posting. What was I going to be posting? Like, hey, I studied, like, give me a high five, tell me a good job. Hey, I trained again today. High five, good job. Like, I felt myself coming from that place of just wanting to get recognition for what I was doing. And ultimately for me, the recognition is I got the final grades. I got the win at the weightlifting meet. Like, that recognition comes, again, like long term. You don't need recognition every day. You need recognition. If it's a 3-month project, you get recognition when you finish. So I'm going to endeavor on Instagram to keep it in the, hey, I'm sharing my process. I want to inspire other people. I want to connect with my friends who don't live here, staying in that lane rather than like, if I feel myself like wanting recognition before I've completed something, I'll deal with it accordingly. And ultimately that too, in the long term, is going to lead to better productivity, towards your goals. So that was a lot. And I'm bordering on an hour. Just, no big deal. Just 2 times the amount of time I wanted to spend. I do have another online lecture, oh joy, coming up in about a minute. So I'm going to end here. Just say, like, personal accountability is also not beating yourself up. So I'm going to challenge you. How can you hold yourself accountable to something that's going to end in a positive long-term outcome in your life? And maybe you're not even sure. Honestly, we're just going for neutral even. If it could be a neutral outcome or positive, just something that, a short-term positive outcome could be long-term negative, if that makes sense. If you focus long-term positive, with little to no downside, that's where the real growth happens. That's where the real, you're knocking down goals, you're checking the boxes. So how can you do that in your life? So I'll leave you with that today. You're welcome for the extra long episode. If you made it this far, you're a real champion. So until next time, this is Blaine out.